Okay, so in order to make large axes, we need larger tools. So yes, starting with a bit of H13, just forging it out on the hammer. Trying to get it as close to possible as the shape, because this is some proper tough stuff, so grinding it is slow. Bit of work on the anvil, looking good. And then I put it in the forge and just let it cool down super slow. It's the only way to get it slightly softer. Just grinding it a bit now. Welting it onto a base plate for the punch. Air cooling the H13 is going to make it harder for actually using it. There we go. I'm just dressing a few drifts I already had. And here they are all finished. The punch and do different progressions of drifts for the double bit and the single bit. Okay, so now with that done, we can start on the axis. So just cutting the billet from 50 to 100 steel, super nice stuff. Forging it out under the hammer, checking it quite often, make sure we get the billet size we want to end up with. And I did let it cool down and put some marks in so I know where to punch. So I'm taking it super slow here because I haven't really done this before. So the new punch, and it's a big billet of steel so it can easily heat up the punch and deform it. Nice. I think it's took me 2 or 3 heats, but ended up with really nice clean punch hole. There you go. Cannot complain with that for first time on these larger axes. So now we're on to just drifting the eye a bit larger, going through the progressions of drifts made earlier. Just a little bit in, tap it on the side, all the way up, both the single bit and the double bit. Not going to the full size hole at this point because many steps more. So the difference here is for carving axes which I normally make, I'd be drawing out the lugs, so putting the drift in a bit and using some fillers to pull the material down and make some lugs. But on these guys, that's not the case. So now you can see I'm starting forging the blade. Just spreading the width first, using some drawing dies sort of perpendicular to the eye. I don't need to do this too much because it's not like a bearded axe where there's lots of it needed, but we definitely need it wider than the initial billet, so I'm doing a little bit now. And as you can see, sort of drawing a bit of length at the same time. Definitely the way, just keep it steady, a little bit of width, a little bit of length, starting to keep the shape of axe that I want in mind. Just taking it there, sort of a little bit at a time. So this is where I'm starting to put the drift in, just a little bit each time, so the same as I was under the hammer, just by hand, and then drawing a bit of the length out, because if not there ends up being loads of material between the eye and the blade. I'm doing this from this stage, a little bit at a time, with each of the new drifts, just creates a really nice transition and it avoids any sort of cold shuts in the front of the eye, which is quite a common issue. So yeah, you can see I'm doing it on the single bit as well. It's nowhere near the final sized eye, but I'm just doing it a little bit at a time. Pull some length out, make a nice transition. Definitely what I'm aiming for. Okay, so moving on to anvil work now. This sort of goes along with the hammer work, but it's really important to keep everything lined up. Keep everything nice, especially on these double bits. If we can keep things symmetrical now, it makes a massive difference. If we get to the point where they're on the piss, it's very difficult to recover. So yeah, you can see I'm also starting to build the shape into the thing here as well. So I've just upset the blade. I'm starting to forge it out. So I want a little bit of an upsweep in the top of the double bit. So I'm using the cross beam here, just to really give it start moving the material exactly where I want it. So I think I'm doing a bit of adjusting on the press here. Just trying to keep the shape. Especially on these larger axes, you've got quite a lot of room for movement shape-wise, because there's so much material there you can get away with pressing, and it sort of behaves itself. On a smaller axe, it will buckle, not be happy being pressed. Yeah, so I'm using the leg vise here to put the drift in. So I think I let the eye get a bit closed up here, so I'm just putting the drift in to try and sort of open it back up, get things aligned again. Again, as I'm moving up the drift progression, I'm still drawing out a little bit from the front of the eye into the blade. And you can see on the double bit, it's still very thick here. So although I've done a lot of shape work, there's still lots of forging to go. See, I'm checking it lots in between using the hammer. Definitely worth doing that, especially on something like this, which I've not done a lot of, and it's not in production. It needs to be done quick. Better to take your time, take another heat, end up with something that's exactly what you're after. You can see I'm basically using the vise here because it's got sort of half round jaws at the top, so it doesn't affect the shape of the bottom of the axe. Yeah, so this sort of shows also why I've set my workshop like this. So get from one station, the vise, the anvil, the hammer, to the other without losing too much heat. And I'm about to move workshop, so I should be doing a video on the move and setting up the new workshop. Again, especially when you're putting the drift in each time, still lots of anvil work going on as I'm putting the drift in a little bit more each time. Working on the bottom of the eye, keeping the blade aligned, even at a low heat like this, it's worth it. Just keep everything straight, saves a lot of trouble at the later stages. And yeah, so I'm moving on to grinding here now. It's almost just a rough grind, just to get the shape we want. I think this single bit ended up needing adjustment anyway, but it just takes off some of the heavy forging marks and gives a sort of clear picture of what we're working with, ready to do a final forging and a final adjustment. We're going to get to a bit more grinding here. As you'll see, the sparks from this bearing steel are so bright and really hot. I'm not sure why, they just feel warmer than normal sparks. You get a little sort of cluster when they all amalgamate together and burn you. It is painful. But yeah, it's pretty from the filming angle, so that's great. Yeah, as you can see, just trying to put a nice curve into the bottom of the axe here. And a little bit of upsweep on the top. I think I ended up changing this as there was just too much, but at the time, yeah, very important to tap that little thing out, because when that lands in your palm, it is not nice. Yeah, just putting a couple little bevels on. You don't really want to leave a sharp edge when you go back to forging. Bit of a glamour shot. Crikey. Yeah, so I'm just giving a double bit of profile here as well. I think I found it really useful to do this because actually getting a double bit even in every aspect, in sort of length and shape, was quite difficult. So getting the ends a really similar curve and nicely profiled, so it's not uneven, did make it easier to have a look. So now I'm giving it an adjust, just putting the drift into the final size as well, making sure it's at the right angle as well, because that makes obviously a big difference when we come to handling it. Yeah, so just trying to line everything up here as well. It's a bit awkward on the double bit because you've got to get the blades in line with each other, but also in line with the eye, otherwise you'll end up just with one being handled right and then the other side being off. Not too bad, just got to take your time. Tab a little bit of checking. Yeah, so it's really nice to forge axes of this size and shape, and I'm a big fan of the American patterns because obviously making carving tools day to day is fun, it's great, but it's always working with smaller billets. It's fun to forge things like this that just so much variety, such small nuances in them as well. Yeah, so adjusting at a lower heat here as well now. It's useful. You can see also I'm hitting it a bit harder because it behaves differently at this temperature. But yeah, pretty happy with that. So this is what I was talking about, changing the upsweep on this big axe. I think I gave it a few wallops with this hammer. You can see it just wasn't moving anywhere. So at this point I started having to think, how am I going to get this top curve to be less drastic? So you can see I'm having a look, holding up this flatter just to make sure it's going to work out nicely. It's worth checking with these things before you go to the press, otherwise, you know, you're going to end up with something you didn't want. Here we go. There we go. Nice. As you can see, I give it a check. Looks good. As I pull it out of the press. Pretty happy with that. There is still a bit of an upsweep on the top, which I'm happy with. But yeah, there's just that bit in the bottom that needs cleaning up that I do in the next heat. Also, when you do this, it swells out a bit, so you can see here I'm just taking it out a little bit at a time. I think you can start to see here how much harder this bearing steel is than, you know, a 1045 or a normal steel, like a mild steel. I mean, it's great for us in that we're going to end up with a super tough axe. You'll see what I do about that when we get to heat shrink. We don't want it to be too hard, so there's some steps I have to take to temper it back a bit. Yeah, you can see I'm just putting the drift in now, final shapings. So yeah, when you press something like that, obviously you're a bit at risk of changing the eye or just making things off. So just putting the drift in here, making sure the eye is good for when we put the handle in it, and making sure things are still lined up, giving it a little brush. Yeah, it's a final brush. You can see it's relatively clean anyway. We just want to make sure we get as much off as possible, not going for a really scaly look. And yeah, it's good practice to keep things as clean as possible. So yeah, I'm just giving it another check. And there might be a few more alterations I'm wanting to do. Yeah, just flicking down right at the end. This keeps going on. I mean, you could spend all day, all week altering something, but at some point you've got to be happy with what you've done. And sometimes the scale does pop off, give you a bit of a nip. There you go, you can see, got me on the thumb. Cool. So here we are, the finished axes. You can see still needs a bit of work on the grinder, but pretty much the shapes they're aiming for. I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, so in between here and the last step, all I did was just clean up the final profile to where I was happy with it. And I just took some of the heavy scale off with 80 grit. I like doing this. Don't want to get too attached to a forged finish all the time. Sometimes it's nice to go for a smoother finish. Yeah, so just die grinding the bottom of the eye here. Super important step, but definitely should not be missed. It makes the handling just go so much better and so much more secure. If you leave it sharp, you're going to end up digging into the wood when you smash the handle in. And that's gonna create a little shelf that over time becomes loose. Yeah, and just take the burr off of a little half round file. Okie dokie, so onto the heat treat. So you can see I'm going all the way up to 890, real hot, doing the first normalising cycle. This big old beast of a kiln does take a while to get going, but it's great once it's moving. Okay, so yes, I have the axe heads here. Pretty happy with them. The single bit came out at 2.14 kg, so 4 pounds 11 ounces, and this one at 1.75 kg, so 3 pounds 14 ounces. Pretty happy with them. There's definitely some bits I'll change in the future, mainly the cross profile. I'll talk about that at the end. So I'm just going to fit the handles up whilst I wait for the kiln to heat up. I don't like putting them in right from zero because then they get really heavy scale, so I'll wait for it to heat up considerably, plonk them in, then do the normalise, and then the heat treat. So work on the handles begin. As you can see by that grain, this ash is properly nice. So yeah, you can see me on the bandsaw here, just cutting out the profile, pushing it through. It's a bit of a funny old blade, but I didn't have a smaller 6mm blade and the curves weren't tight on this handle, so it's all good. Just, there we go. Yeah, you can see, just take your time, cut away the bits that aren't the handle, and you end up with something nice. So yeah, you can see I'm cutting out the thickness of the handle, so cutting down the length of the handle. I did end up going pretty thin on this handle. It feels really nice. I think through testing we'll see if I went too far. But yeah, I wanted something thin and whippy. Yeah, I'm going to cut a bit of an angle onto the eye just to save a bit of time with the draw knife and fitting. Coming all the way down. This looks like a bit of a safety hazard, but I'm pretty careful with my fingers. So fingers crossed, nothing happens. There we go. This makes good kindling as well, cutting down the length. Right, so fitting up the handle, you can see I'm using the draw knife. There was a bit of I think there was a slight grain direction change in the head here, so it was giving me a bit of tear out, which you can see is why I'm going quite slow. I think once I got below it, or once it started to shape up, it started to sort itself out, and then with a spoke shave as well, it was fine, but I'm going quite slowly here. Taking some nice curls here. When I'm doing one-offs like this, I do really enjoy making the handles. Such a nice change of pace from the forging, which is so loud and, you know, almost jarring. It's not, I really enjoy it, but just to go from one extreme to the other is something super nice about making tools. Here you can see me, I'm about to start using the spoke shave as well. This is actually quite dull, as you can probably hear. It's in the end I ended up sharpening it for later in the hand. I'll mention that in a bit. But it is really nice to do this after the draw knife. It gives you slightly better surface contact with the actual axe eye. Cutting the curve, simple as, just cut to the line. And I just gave it a test fit here. I'm not going for the final fit because obviously I've still got a heat treat, but just to give me, see where I'm contacting, where I'm not. Give it a look, see if I'm relatively happy with it. I'm trying to check from all angles here because I also, although like alignment, as in between the handle and edge is important, also the shape, so if I need to tilt it up or down. Just giving it a good look. Put some little marks of where I need to take material away to move it. So just tapping the handle out now. I only fitted it up once before the kiln was the right temperature, but it was enough. So yeah, the kiln is toasty here. It's probably about 850 degrees. So not quite up to temperature, but it drops a lot when you put the cold axe heads in anyway. So in they go. All the way up to 890 for that first normalizing. And out they come. Just to air cool with 52-100 or 100 CR6 bearing steel. The grain just expands so much, so it has to go hot and then we bring it down. I really do need to make a wire rack as opposed to just putting them on the oily floor. That's the reason it's burning, but yeah. And once they've cooled down, they go back in. I think I hardened it about 840. So obviously a big drop in temperature as worked way down, refined the grain structure. Here we go, quenching in the oil. Does make some interesting noises, especially this steel. I think because it scales really quite heavily once it's scaled, the pops it makes can sound like it's cracking, but I've got used to it now. It's just the scale popping off. There we go. Sort of make sure it's in there enough, give it a wiggle about. Okay, so here's a little trick. Tempering in a deep fryer. You see oil at a certain temperature is much more consistent in there. Here we go. Wire wheeling. Just cleaning all the oil off. This wire wheel is not too aggressive, so it still leaves quite a dark finish, which is really nice. Just taking my time. I want to make sure it doesn't nip it and lob it at my feet. Here we go. Starting to grind, rough grind in the bevel. As you see with this steel, because it gets so hard, I ended up tempering it higher than the oil can go. So I'm only just rough grinding it in now. It's quite a bit different to what I'm used to grinding, so just taking my time. It's a bit of a convex grind. Nearly everything I make has flat grinds or concave grinds meant for carving, so I'm just really going slow with it, just figuring it out. So yeah, here you can see just how hard it is. This is a brand new chainsaw file and it's just completely skating it. Even like once you've ground the oxides off, So they go back in the kiln. This is the next day because I have to let the kiln cool down. I think, yeah, so I tempered at 220. The fryer can only go up to 190. Here we go. So a really dark straw, just on the edge of that purple colour. The double bit does look hotter, but it was nearly all that dark straw. You see me try on the file again. It's still really hard, but it is biting. I think because this is just more of prototyping, I wasn't too worried here. In the future, I think I will temper them even more, which is really good because it's going to be so tough. But I don't like it when the steel chips as opposed to dulls, so definitely need more tempering. Here we go, starting to grind the full final bevel on. You can see there's a lot of checking going on. I'm not really sure 100% what I'm doing, so I'm just taking my time with it. Yeah, on the 180 grit belt here, I've probably roughed it in almost to an edge with the 80 or 60 grit, and then on here is the 180 grit belt. You can see I'm trying to keep my arms pretty still here and just move up and down a little bit to give a controlled amount of movement so I get a nice even convex grind, but it's a learning process. It was quite nice in the end, but it did take a while. So yeah, you can see I'm using a 400 grit belt here. I ended up not liking this because it had too much flex in it, so I went onto the wheel just to smooth it out a bit. This worked much nicer, and it set it up really nicely for the polishing. Yeah, so I'm using a really aggressive compound here. I'm just using it to smooth out all of the little marks from grinding and the oscillations. And then just onto the medium compound here, which is somewhat equivalent to 1200 grit. Just taking my time, making sure it's nice and even with polishing. The more time you put in, the nicer whatever you end up with. And yeah, just onto the white compound. Obviously, really taking my time here again. As you can see, the mirror polish that's coming off it is super nice. So I'm just making sure I get it all. Clean up all of the previous scratch marks. End up with something super nice. There you go. Super shiny. Yeah, so just doing the same thing on the double bit now. This was a bit of a... I'm not sure how I felt about this, because obviously the polish can catch and lob something at you. And I've got a sharp, extremely sharp edge a few inches away from my stomach, so might have to figure out making a sheath before next time. Okay, so the work begins on actually shaping the handle. So this is the handle blank. I'm just drawing some lines on with a Sharpie. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sort of faceted shape before I go to smooth. And that's the way I'm going to do it, just to know that I end up with a nice, even, smooth shape. So I'm just using the wheel with a sort of 60 grit belt. Obviously this is a belt that I'm only using from wood. Just carving away, carving big facets the length of the handle. This just gives a really nice base before we move on to the hand tools. That put some shape into the handle, so I know that when the finished product's done, it's not only smooth, but it's also nice and even and symmetrical underneath the sort of sanded smoothness of it. You see I'm checking lots. Obviously I haven't done a lot of these handles, so I'm taking my time with it, especially on the pole here, because I really didn't know what I was doing really to end up with. Yeah, there you go, you can see a bit of a close-up shot. I'm just using it the same way almost as a draw knife, just it doesn't follow the grain, just blast through it. So I was just carving away, carving some big facets on. Obviously, although it's octagonal, as in 8 facets, it's almond shaped. Yeah, and then there we go, 180 grit. I think this might have actually been 150. And you can see I'll just go on each of the facets first, take them up to a higher grit, and then here I am just smoothing it out. Obviously 60 grit isn't the finish we want, so with this 180 grit, sort of bisecting all the facets and making it that next level of smooth, but also just cleaning up each facet as well. So here we have the handles after the sort of power carving. Got a nice rasp, really nice shave, ready to shape them by hand. Here's a little look at what they look like after the sander. So relatively comfy even at this stage, but just really put the shape in, ready for the hand tools. Super nice rasp, I really enjoy using this by Oreo Tools. You can see I'm just working across the handle. The rasp is an interesting tool because it doesn't really cut. It's akin to sandpaper, just it's all about going across the grain if you want to use it efficiently. You can see here I'm sort of experimenting a little bit with going sort of diagonally. Yeah, you can see I'm working all of the aspects of the handle here. even down to the palm swell. Just really going for a round here, taking my time. It's nice having the workpiece here because you can feel it, you can see where it feels comfy. Obviously your hand is really good at telling where the high spots are. Just taking my time. Yeah, so this is when I sort of held it up. There's only one light in this workshop bit, and it's above, so I was using the light to see where the uneven spots were, just taking them off. Not necessarily the quickest way of doing this, but it did work out super nicely. Yes, you can see I'm using a spoke shave. So I was saying earlier, it sounds a lot nicer because I have to sharpen the blade between them. Along the length of the handle, this handle grain didn't end up behaving. At this stage it was really fun using the spoke shave. Yeah. So I'm basically just taking off the facets I made with the sander here with the spoke shave. So I quite quickly went back to the rasp because I was getting a lot of tear out of the spoke shave. You can start to see how quickly you can remove metal, even with this rasp, which I think is a relatively fine grain compared to some of their really aggressive rasps. You can hear the difference when I'm going across grain. And here I'm testing out one of the gouges I make day to day. It was really nice to use. This is a bit I actually forgot to do with the sander, so it was good fun to use this gouge. You can see it's just chomping through this end grain ash. The finish it's leaving is super shiny. Yeah, and then I use this detail sander, a sort of thing I've only started doing recently. This is a relatively slow way of sanding the handle, and it doesn't take off a lot of material, it's quite slow. But because I built the shape in with the sander, with the hand, the rasp, this is really just pure finish, not changing the shape at all. 120 grit, then 180 grit. And here are the finished handles, ready for smoil. Yeah, you can see I'm just trying to apply the oil here. There we go, I take my time, just quite heavy amount actually on the rag. But I want to give it a really thick layer of oil, and then I'll give it another couple of coats later. You can see what I do here also, so I give it a thick coat of oil first, then I use a different rag for the second coat. That seems to be the best way to get it clean, which is pretty tricky with dirt, so blacksmith hands. And here they are, finished handles, pretty happy with them, especially the single bit action. It's the first time I've done one like that. Time for the fit up. So yeah, I'm just sinking it on here, and then giving it a check, lots of checking, and then what I'm doing is I'm using the vise, and I'm just, as you'll see in a second, I tilt the axe because I want to drop down one side to get it on more evenly. Just use the vise to give it a bit of support where I want it to move, and then I sink it on further, the standard way. Lots of checking, on the double bit especially. It's easy to, if one side drops down too much, it's very noticeable. When I'm happy with it, sink it on further. It would have gone on quite a bit more. And then time to wedge on the handles. So I tap them in first by hand like this, as far as they go before they start to crack. And then I've just plonked it down on a block of steel that's on the floor. At the moment this seems to be the best way I've found to seat these longer handles, especially when it comes to putting the wedge in. Yep, so just cutting off the excess wedge and the top of the handle, the excess. Final little clean up on the grinder. If I'm going for a specific shape, if I want a concave or a convex, I'll put that in here. I'm trying to be extra careful here, obviously you don't want to touch the top of the axe to the grind, otherwise you're going to get little marks, and I want that black finish. And now I've done seating the head and putting the wedge in, I clean up the bottom of the palm swell, and see it's got hammer marks and dirtiness on it. I haven't done a handle like this single bit before, so I wasn't exactly sure what I was going for. I ended up going for something like that. I didn't go for a bowl shape that I've seen other people do. Might have a go at that next time. Yeah, so just oiling the palm swell now. Obviously that's not got any oil yet. Taking my time. Obviously this has been many hours of work, so I look a bit like I'm nursing a baby here, but no, it is just snacks. And here we have some glamour shots, so I'll let you watch them. Okay, so thank you for watching. Yes, here they are. Pretty happy with them. Handles I'm really happy with. They came out super nice. They took a lot of time, but I do think it was worth it. The one thing I'd like to change on both of them is the cross profile. I feel, especially on the single bit, it's kind of in between, sort of chopping and splitting. Prefer it to either be like splitting profile or really sharp for throwing chips. So that's the thing. And the same on the double bit, relatively happy with the handle, super happy with the shape, just the cross profile again. I think what I'm going to do next time is have a thinner billet. So these are about 27 to 30 mil, which is what I use for carving axes, which obviously have got a lug. So you pull the material down to make that shape. On something like this without the lugs, I think we're going to go for 22 mil, something quite thin, be a bit tricky to punch. What it will do is it will make the cheeks thinner, or probably make a smaller drift as well, and it will stop this sort of bulging to the blade, so we'll get a nicer transition. So that should be good. No sheath in this video, there is some in the other one, so have a look at that. Yeah, thank you for watching, there should be more.